Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. Welcome back to the Device Talks Weekly podcast. I am at SRS 2024. This is Society for Robotic Surgery. It's Thursday night. It was a fantastic first day. My gosh, what a conference, and what a collection of amazing companies and really fascinating panel discussions and surgeons. So this is in Orlando this year, and very happy I had the opportunity to attend. So keep an eye out on LinkedIn. If you haven't already seen it, I'll be posting a lot of content from here, a lot of videos and interviews I'm doing, and I hope you're enjoying that show. Today, we're going to talk a pulse field ablation with Kevin Chaplin, who's the CEO of Kardium. Kardium is a company in Vancouver that I should have heard of but had not heard of. And it's really a fascinating company. They raised $100 million recently. We'll get into that in the conversation. But they've developed a PFA device, an ablation tool that's unlike any of the other ablation tools I've seen. It has just larger ablation surfaces. And we'll get it, and I'll let Kevin get into the details of what it can do and how it can do it. But to me, it just really seems like a sort of a game-changing technology. It'll be interesting to see how this story develops. As I said, Kardium raised over $100 million. Could be in a position to go public if markets allowed it. Could be in a position to take this far in the commercial space and be a prime candidate for anyone who wants to bulk up their PFA portfolio. Of course, we already have Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and others in the PFA space. And this would be an opportunity for someone who perhaps is not in the space, but is in an adjacency to buy a ready-made product with, I'm guessing, a growing market. So Kevin shares Kardium's story. It's a bit different than other med techs. Really was founded, I think, with an engineer's focus, and it was I had an interesting conversation with Kevin. So I hope you'll enjoy that. Before I begin, I want to remind you or announce, if you haven't heard yet, Device Talks West is registration is open. I've got an early agenda up on the website. It's going to be a great few days, October 16th and 17th, 2 days at Santa Clara Convention Center. I say few because there may be some added activities similar to what we did in Boston. So if you want to get an early look or an early opportunity to join those offsite activities, and I won't say anything other than we visited Medtronic's headquarters in Boston, and I don't have other things nailed down completely. So that's as far as I'm willing to go. But if you want to be the first to have an opportunity to participate in offsite visits, and you're already attending Device Talks West, and you want to save a couple of $100 off registration, then I would not wait and just register at west.devicetalks.com right now, and you'll get, again, an early notification of some of the cool stuff we have going on. So again, go to west.devicetalks.com. Sorry, I'm a little tired, and anyone who followed my LinkedIn feed, and I heard from a few people today, got in late last night because of a delayed JetBlue flight. So we've all been there. It happens. So finally, please join us on June 25th for our Device Talks Tuesdays. Our great friends at Resonetics will be putting on a discussion around a topic that always performs well, nitinol. The title is Demystifying Nitinol Shape Setting, Prescriptive Tools for Achieving Target Performance. You can go to devicetalks.com, look for the Device Talks Tuesdays tab, and you can register for that as well. You can watch it live at 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, June 25th, or you can watch it at your convenience on demand. Either way, bring your questions. You can ask questions, and if you're listening live, you'll get them answered immediately. If you're watching on demand, you'll get them answered, I'm sure, sometime soon after they've been sent to Resonetics. All right, that is it for my little song and dance. Device Talks West registration is open. Device Talks Tuesdays. Come on down, learn more about nitinol. And now, before we get this podcast started, I'd like to bring in our special sponsor Freudenberg Medical. Thank you to them for sponsoring Device Talks Weekly and a lot of our other great products. We had them on a Device Talks Tuesday just recently. So thanks to Freudenberg again for supporting Device Talks. I'm speaking with Paul Weaver. Paul is the Director of Product Development at Freudenberg Medical. Paul, welcome. Tell us about Freudenberg Medical, and we're going to be talking a lot about electrophysiology. Talk about what you do in the space.
Yeah, hi Tom. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm delighted to be joining you and your listeners on today's podcast. So at Freudenberg Medical, we are a global partner to medical device OEMs for product design, development, and manufacturing. This includes medical components and tubing to drug and device solutions and finished devices. We have 11 locations worldwide, located in all the key medtech clusters globally. We've been supporting leading players in the EP devices market for over 15 years at this point, partnering on a range of product solutions from steerable access devices through to ablation and visualization catheters. Our specific design and volume manufacturing capabilities for the EP market is supported from 5 of our sites in 3 continents with a combined footprint of now over 400,000 square feet. And we are obviously very proud to be a trusted outsourcing partner to our customers for their EP product portfolios.
That's really fascinating, Paul. So what are some of the unique design and manufacturing challenges associated with EP devices?
Well, Tom, I think there are 2 that come to mind. Firstly, catheter steering. So in EP procedures, we're navigating the intricate left side of the heart, which is a constantly dynamic 3D structure. So for physicians and engineers alike, precision steering is essential. We're strategizing how to maneuver through the atrium, avoid delicate structures, and prevent catheter misplacements for the best patient outcome. This is where multiplanar catheter and handle steering mechanisms and their associated design nuances step in. The second key challenge is probably around real estate management within the catheter. So for context, most EP catheters are about half the diameter of a ballpoint pen, yet we're cramming them with more and more technology now. Alongside steering mechanisms, we could be incorporating energy delivery systems, sensors, optics, and irrigation functions. The question is, how do we fit this all in? One main answer lies in cutting-edge design for manufacturing. Take, for instance, the shift in cable management from individual electrode wires to flexible PCBs and flex circuits along the catheter shaft. This not only streamlines the assembly process, but also enhances performance and reliability. So in essence, Tom, I feel the catheter engineering community is rising to the occasion with remarkable ingenuity and incremental innovations.
All right, we'll hear more from Paul Weaver a little later in the podcast. If you want to find out more about Freudenberg Medical, go to its website, freudenbergmedical.com. And Freudenberg is spelled Freudenberg, freudenbergmedical.com. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Kevin Chaplin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here.
The PFA space is obviously one that folks are talking about. I've been talking with some of the larger established players in this still growing space. I don't know if anyone's quite established in it yet, but I was excited to hear the news of Kardium raising money recently and of your different approach. So I hope to unpack that a little later in our conversation. But as always, I'd love to learn about our guests a bit. How did you find your way into the medical device industry, Kevin?
So I worked for a number of technology companies in my career. My background is in engineering. I studied chemical engineering, worked as an engineer for a number of years, and worked in technology companies in Vancouver. And one of the companies that I worked at, a number of the key individuals there left and started a medical device company. They saw a huge unmet need, a huge problem in atrial fibrillation treatments. Mm-hmm. There was, the outcomes have always been fairly poor 50 to 65% success rate with the procedure. And so felt we could do better by designing a world-beating system that delivers a better treatment for atrial fibrillation. And so that's, I worked at this technology company called Creo. I got asked to join Kardium very early on and have been there for almost 17 years now, building the globe mapping and ablation system.
So did you have any interest in medical devices before, or did you just see this as a technical challenge that you wanted to take on?
No, we were very naive when we started. The team had very little experience with medical devices. So myself and Doug Gertson, who's our president and chief operating officer, Doug and I worked together at Creo, and we started looking at the market first and saying there's a huge opportunity here with a very poor technology solution. And so Doug is an engineer as well. So we looked at it as an engineering challenge to build a better system for treating atrial fibrillation. And our goal when we started looking at the device was how to get as many electrodes into the atrium as possible in order to provide a mapping system as well as a therapeutic catheter that could both map and treat the atrial fibrillation all with a single device. So that was the kind of genesis of the company. Was here's a huge market with very poor technology solutions. How could we engineer something better to provide a better treatment for patients?
Interesting. So what were the origins of the technology? Did you develop it, and were you working with doctors, with cardiologists about this technology? Because it's an engineering problem, but it's obviously a space maybe you weren't familiar with, working in the human body.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an unusual genesis, I think, for a company. The three of the founders of the company. One is the chairman of our company. He's a businessman, Amos Michelson. Another is Dan Gelbart. He's an engineering and technology professional. And then the third was Dr. Sam Lichtenstein, who's actually a cardiac surgeon here in Vancouver. So not a cardiologist, but he had responsibility for the cardiology team here in Vancouver. So he could see the poor results and basically said there has to be a better way to do this treatment than single tip point by point RF, which ends up getting very poor outcomes. So that was kind of the idea, was look, these patients are being treated. When we do this procedure surgically, we know that we can get almost 100% efficacy. So if as a cardiac surgeon, if I do this procedure, the efficacy is almost 100%. Yet when electrophysiologists do it with an RF catheter, why are the results only 50 to 65%? So could we engineer something better? And so we worked with Sam and a number of cardiologists, but that was really it wasn't a doctor that said, here's what I think you should design. Can you just implement it? It was really starting with the problem and saying there's this challenge here. We just need a better engineering solution. And then all of the intellectual property, all of the designs and the kind of the iterations on the catheter have been developed at Kardium by the team.
What sort of interaction have you had with the other medical device companies in this space? I mean, we've seen, obviously Boston Scientific, Medtronic, Steve Michelson has started a new company in the space. So there have been pockets of PFA emerging independently from one another over time or through acquisition. Have you sort of just been keeping to yourselves up there in Vancouver and sort of developing this independently from others in the space, or have you had interaction with others in the medical device industry? And I don't know, when I say interactions, you're obviously not going to collaborate with them, but it's just fascinating that you sort of have emerged from Vancouver with this new approach to this really hot clinical area right now. Have you been in stealth mode this whole time?
Yeah, we've been mostly in, I would say mostly in stealth mode. We have, the big companies like Medtronic and Boston Scientific, Abbott, and Biosense Webster are certainly aware of us.
Yeah.
We meet with them regularly. They like to keep tabs on what we're doing,
Okay.
because I think we're bringing a very disruptive technology to the market, and I think PFA is super exciting right now because it's such a disruptive technology overall. I think years from now, there's going to be business case studies on this period in electrophysiology where this totally disruptive technology came. What did all the major players do? What were the new startups that came, and how did everyone respond to this? And which technology ultimately is going to succeed or do well in the market long term? I think it's going to be very interesting to see how these major players deal with the disruptive force of PFA.
Interesting.
And yes, I mean we've essentially been in stealth mode and developed a lot of this technology on our own. We keep tabs on all of the developments in this field and the conferences and movements in the technology and treatment, and obviously when PFA kind of started to become more mainstream, that was when it became logical for us to use it on our device as well. So our system is designed to use RF and PFA. So we actually have dual energy on the system. So it's one of the neat features of our device is that we still are able to do radio frequency ablation. But we didn't collaborate with any of the big companies in order to develop the system. It's really been we've raised the funding and done the development ourselves.
I want to circle back a little later and just ask about the medtech infrastructure up there in Vancouver, because coincidentally you're the second interview I've done today with someone up in that area. And I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
Who was the other one?
Someone with Boston Scientific. So I'll leave it at that. But
okay.
Yeah, but it'd be interesting just to learn how it is developing a company up there. But now we'll bring back our sponsor, Freudenberg Medical. Once again, I'm here with Paul Weaver. Paul is Director of Product Development at Freudenberg Medical. Paul, we're going to be talking about pulse field ablation a little more in this podcast episode. Can you tell me about your experiences so far in pulse field ablation?
Yes, well, the race is very evident, Tom. As your listeners will know, all the large EP players are highly active with multiple PFA designs in the mix, some already successfully on the market. Add to that the estimated dozen or more small and mid-sized companies also eyeing the PFA opportunity. So certainly it makes for an exciting and competitive landscape. That said, we see many of these players looking to specialist external partners like Freudenberg Medical to accelerate the pace of catheter development and, more crucially, provide turnkey ability to scale manufacturing of these catheters to high volume. There is a keen focus on reliability, previous experience with PFA catheters, and the ability of the partner to always hit critical timelines. And it's important to note, it's not just about the PFA catheters that are the focus of development. There are complementary enabling devices for access, steering, and visualization, which must also be considered. Freudenberg Medical is proud to be an active partner in PFA and equally as proud of the contribution we have made so far to help pioneering customers claim firsts in the market.
Great stuff, Paul Weaver. We'll have Paul Weaver, Freudenberg Medical, back a little later in this podcast episode. Once again, if you'd like to find out more information about the company, go to its website, freudenbergmedical.com. Let's focus a bit on Kardium and talk a bit about your globe mapping and ablation solution. So, what is the technology you developed? Help our listeners understand it.
I'll do my best to describe it just in audio. It's always better to see it
I know.
in person. So what we've done with Kardium with the globe mapping and ablation system is we've developed an all-in-one kind of complete solution to the treatment of atrial fibrillation. So it's a multi-electrode array that gets deployed into the left atrium using just standard access to the left atrium.
Mm-hmm.
We put in a catheter with 122 electrodes. That's in contrast to, today they use single tip catheters, which have one electrode. The new PFA devices that are coming out have, somewhere between 10 and 20 electrodes.
Wow. Okay.
So 122 is kind of like one or two orders of magnitude more electrodes. Why is that important? That means that you can do not only mapping of the atrium, so every one of those electrodes can map. Mm-hmm. We can record electrograms, we can map anatomy, we can actually create a diagnostic and physical map of the atrium by moving the catheter around inside the atrium. But then it allows us to do a very effective treatment of the pulmonary veins, first of all. So that's the first step in the procedure, is called pulmonary vein isolation, so PVI. And to do PVI, what you have to do is burn or ablate the tissue around the veins. So you block the veins by killing or burning the tissue around the vein. And with 122 electrodes, using PFA, you can do that very quickly and very effectively. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big differences between the Globe system and other PFA devices, is that we apply one application of our PFA pulse train and the vein is isolated. The other systems require multiple applications, but because of the sheer number of our electrodes, we can do it in true single shot, is what they call it. We have the ability to isolate the vein quickly and effectively and durably. And then, sorry.
No, so does that mean a shorter procedure?
Yes. Because of the.
By what count? Can someone do in 10 minutes what someone else might have to need 30 minutes for another? And I'm just creating numbers I'm pulling out numbers out of thin air, but give me a sense of how much faster this. And I don't know if speed is ultimately what you're looking for. It's not, but certainly if you can get a procedure done more quickly, that's attractive.
Yeah, I mean, so with single tip. Traditional single tip catheters, the procedure is often 2 to 4 hours to do, and doctors can do 2 patients, 3 patients in a day. With cryo, doctors like cryo because it was a shorter procedure. Mm-hmm. They got the same efficacy with the cryo balloon, but the procedure time was shorter. They could do it in under an hour. So now you had, a 45-minute dwell time in the left atrium, and they could go, the catheter would be inside the patient for less than 60 minutes. With PFA, what we're seeing now is that dwell time can be even shorter now. I think we're looking at 30 minutes in the left atrium, and our procedure, our dwell time in our clinical study that we just presented last month was just over 20 minutes. We think we can get that down even shorter, so that you're doing basically putting the catheter in, in 15 minutes, you've isolated all the veins and you've done the first step of the procedure. You can stop there and the patient can go home. But then with our system, you can then look at doing a detailed map of the atrium using the mapping functionality of the catheter, and then do additional ablation in what doctors call PVI plus. Mm-hmm. PVI plus is kind of the next step in the procedure, which is you look for additional targets outside of the pulmonary veins. So that's an important procedure, step in the procedure to improve the outcomes in paroxysmal patients, but also in persistent atrial fibrillation, where the outcomes are very, very low. Using the catheter to map and then ablate additional targets outside of the pulmonary veins is what will increase the efficacy of the procedure.
And are the other procedures, are you able to map and treat with the same catheter like you can with yours, or is yours unique in that?
So, different companies will claim different things. Some catheters don't have any mapping capability. So, for example, the cryo balloon, which is not a PFA technology, but essentially There's no mapping in that. You push the cryo balloon into the vein and you isolate the vein by freezing. there's no additional mapping and ablation outside of the veins. The single tip catheters or focal ablation catheters that are used today, or there's some development work on PFA catheters that are single tip. With those, you can do a mapping as well, but you're doing it one point at a time. Mm-hmm. So it's very laborious. So for most doctors who want to do mapping, they put in a second mapping catheter. So they would first put in a mapping catheter to create a map of the atrium, withdraw that, and then put in a PFA ablation catheter. And then use it. So it ends up being two catheters to do the procedure. The value of the globe is that you can just do it all with the same system. And then you know that where you're applying your ablation therapy, your PFA is exactly where you mapped previously.
I do encourage people to go to your website, Kardium, KARDIUM.com, and look at some of the imagery. It's very cool, and it looks like in the illustration like a golden globe, sort of just planting itself up there in the atrium. So definitely a good imagery to go along with your verbal description. So, and we'll take a quick break from this conversation for one final visit from our friends at Freudenberg Medical. Once again, I am speaking with Paul Weaver. Paul's the Director of Product Development at Freudenberg Medical. Paul, as an outsourcing partner, do you see any new or additional challenges in pulse field ablation devices over and above, say, the traditional RF or cryoablation designs?
Well, that's an interesting question, Tom. If I reflect on first-generation PFA devices, we are seeing a blend of built-for-purpose and repurposed designs. So I think as we transition into the next phase, we anticipate a shift towards more purpose-built designs, which will undoubtedly introduce fresh design opportunities and complexities. So from the perspective of a catheter engineer, as we work through these second-generation devices, the evidence of real-world data will be instrumental in guiding future design trajectories in PFA. I believe establishing gold standards, particularly regarding energy delivery techniques, such as single-shot, focal, or point-by-point approaches, the shape of the electrical field and waveform, all of these factors will be pivotal. The nuances between unipolar and bipolar energy delivery and the necessity for mapping remains an open question. So it wouldn't surprise me, Tom, to witness the eventual dominance of a hybrid device, amalgamating various energy modalities or mapping techniques into a single device, potentially packing even more technology into the one catheter. So while we do this, we also need to figure out how do we keep sheet profiles low for easy handling and maneuverability. I believe as PFA matures, it will certainly present novel challenges, as is typical of any emerging therapy. But at Freudenberg Medical, working with our customers, we are relishing and embracing these challenges head on.
All right, Paul, a final question, a little bit of a challenging one. If you had to condense your experiences with PFA so far into just 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Great question, Tom. I think the first would be excitement, second, pace, and the third, expertise. So excitement because of the transformative potential that PFA holds. In a lot of ways, it's akin to the excitement surrounding breakthroughs like drug-eluting stents and TAVI. PFA is a new kid on the block, which is getting a lot of attention, so there's excitement when you are contributing to that. We know pace is crucial in this highly competitive race to the market, and everyone aims for that first mover advantage, but obviously not everyone can attain it. And finally, expertise is essential. In this fast-evolving field, outsourced partners must offer unparalleled EP credentials and a strong track record if they are to guide a customer's program on a successful and streamlined path to market.
All right, that's great stuff. Thank you, Paul Weaver, for joining us on this podcast episode. Thank you, Freudenberg, for sponsoring this episode. Once again, if you'd like to find out more information about Freudenberg Medical, go to its website, freudenbergmedical.com. That's FREUDENBERG medical.com. I would imagine the benefits of a faster procedure. Obviously, economically, you would get to do more procedures in a day, but I would just think every fewer minute you're inside a person's body, giving them treatment is better for the patient. I think getting in and out probably is optimal. Is that how you see it? What are the benefits of the shorter procedure?
Yeah, so I think overall, just to maybe back up a step, I'd say there's four main benefits that the globe brings. One of them is procedure time, so shorter procedure time. But I think that the other three are probably more important than a shorter procedure time. The first is safety. So you want a safe procedure, and I think procedure time adds to that, exactly as you say. Shorter procedure has many benefits to the patients. We can do the procedure under sedation as opposed to general anesthesia. The recovery time with that is a lot quicker. The patient recovers and can go home the same day in most cases. Doctors and patients, obviously, with safety, want to avoid complications, and I think that's one of the big attractions of PFA is that there's lower complications with PFA. It's a safer ablation technology. So that's one of I'd say the primary benefit of moving to PFA. And in our studies with the Globe system, we've actually shown a very low complication rate. Our European data and our Pulse EU study showed 0 major device adverse events in the study. So we're very pleased with the safety profile of our device. The second important benefit is efficacy. So, what we set out to do when we started Kardium was to develop a better treatment for atrial fibrillation. And our mission says, that is our mission statement still. It's to deliver the best treatment for AFib. And so that comes with efficacy. And what we're trying to do is move the needle on efficacy by delivering a more effective, more durable pulmonary vein isolation initially, combine that with mapping and PVI plus and ablation outside of the atrium. And we're seeing that in our clinical data as well, is a better efficacy for patients. The third benefit we bring is procedure time. And we've kind of talked about that. We're trying to make the procedure shorter and faster. And then the fourth benefit is precision. And precise placement of the lesion, which actually contributes to all the other three, safety, procedure time, and efficacy. If you can deliver a precise therapy where you need it and not damage collateral tissue where you don't need to ablate, that's better for the patients, better for the procedure time. And so one point I haven't made, we have these 122 electrodes that all do mapping, but we actually, in our software, you can select which electrodes to turn on and off.
I was going to ask. Yeah,
we don't turn them all on. I think almost every other system does that. They just blast every electrode, and you get the lesion. We can map, see which electrodes are in contact with the tissue, determine that we have contact around the vein, and then only select those ones that we want to deliver a lesion to. So it's a very precise therapy.
And I would think and I was going to ask that because with all those electrodes, I don't know how you could be more precise in something with fewer electrodes, but that explains it. But I would think the shape of the device of the catheter as well just gives you more options. As to, you don't have to work so hard maybe to position it inside the atrium because you've got electrodes all around it.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. We kind of say we're position agnostic.
Yeah.
All you have to do is get the catheter up to the vein, and then it basically nestles into the vein. Kind of the vein is the entrance to the vein is a bit of a cone shape, and you just push the catheter into there. It's kind of like docking at the space station. You push it in there, and you get really nice contact around the entrance to the vein, and that's exactly where you want to ablate. We iterated in our development around a number of different sizes of catheters that would be optimal. We ended up on this device, which is 30 millimeters in diameter, 122 electrodes. And that allows you to find the vein very quickly, identify which electrodes are in contact, and then just ablate those ones. So the learning curve is actually very short.
Yeah.
The usability of the system is very easy, and it makes it very easy to find the vein and then just ablate the electrodes you need to.
Yeah, I would think that would level the playing field as far as someone who's less experienced would be able to manage something like this a bit easier than if they had to learn how to finesse something else that had a tip or a single side or.
Exactly. That's totally correct. A number of the doctors that have been participating in our clinical studies have said that this makes the procedure operator independent. Like it makes it a much, like you say, levels the playing field in that you don't have to be a highly experienced user who has had many years of manipulating a single tip catheter or some sort of operator dependent skill. It's really just find the vein, select the electrodes in our software, and click the ablate button.
Fascinating. So you mentioned trials. Where are you in clinical trials?
So we've just completed enrollment in our pivotal study, which is an exciting milestone for everyone at Kardium. It's a long road to get to actually getting an IDE study approved. This is a class 3 device in the US. It's a PMA study. So it's a large study where we started treating the patients last year. We've treated a large number of patients in Europe prior to that. And we presented those data at the Heart Rhythm Society meeting in May this year. But our pivotal study is just completed now. We're following those patients. For atrial fibrillation, once you've completed treating the patients, you then follow the patients for 12 months. And if the patient has no recurrence of their AFib in that 12 months, they're considered a success. If they have any AFib detected, then they're a failure. So you follow the patients for a year and see if the procedure was a success or not. So we have to follow those patients now for a year and then submit that data to the FDA, Health Canada, and other regulatory bodies and get regulatory approval. So we're hoping to get regulatory approval towards the end of next year.
And I'm sorry, did you say you had approval anywhere else outside the U.S., or is the U.S. your only target at the moment? You mentioned Health Canada, but...
we'll be using this clinical study, or the study's called Pulsar. We'll be using the Pulsar study data to get regulatory approval in all jurisdictions. So that data will be used for FDA, Health Canada, Europe.
Okay.
So
and let's talk about the financing.
We're not currently approved in any jurisdiction.
Understood.
For pulse field ablation.
Do you have approval for something?
We actually did get an earlier version of the device approved in Europe. We do have the CE mark for our RF version of the Globe system.
Oh, okay.
That was not that was a proof of concept commercial launch. So we did launch that in Europe during COVID, actually, 2020. But by that stage, we developed the PFA system as well. So that was kind of where the focus of the company went.
So is the RF product going to be a going concern moving forward, or is it? Are you focusing entirely on PFA?
So the device now does PFA and RF.
Okay.
So it's essentially a combination system. So the approval of the RF system allowed us to actually just add PFA to the system. So if a doctor wants to do RF, they can still do that in the procedure. But we expect that most pulmonary vein isolation and most left atrial ablation will be done with PFA. We think there is probably an advantage to using RF in the right atrium to treat atrial flutters. There have been some potential side effects of using PFA in the right atrium, which you can avoid by using RF.
That's fascinating. So let's talk about the financing side of things. You've raised $104 million in a round that was announced the week that we're recording this on June 11th. You've got investors, T. Rowe Price, amongst others as investors. So how much have you raised total? Because did you raise a large round as well a couple of years ago?
That's correct. We were supported early on by private individuals and private investors. And in the last round prior to this one, that was led by Fidelity and T. Rowe Price, who are two of our largest investors and fantastic supporters of the company. We're very lucky to have such great investors as part of our part of our team. That they continued to help us raise financing in this round. So this round is again led by Fidelity with T. Rowe Price as well, and then we've added to the investor cap table Durable Capital Partners.
And how do you anticipate this capital being used? Will this get you through, you hope, regulatory approval, assuming it goes by the timeline that you've laid out?
Yes, the goal of the previous financing was to develop the PFA system, run a clinical study with it, and bring it to a clinical study and show that we could succeed with that. Mm-hmm. The goal of this financing that we've just raised now is to get regulatory approval and start commercial sales of the device. So the expected use of these funds will be to get regulatory approval, probably initially from the FDA, and then ramp up our manufacturing. So build up our manufacturing team, add additional manufacturing facilities and capabilities, and start building inventory of the globe system. And then we're also going to be building up our commercial team. So sales and clinical support to start doing cases commercially in the second half of next year.
And the investors you have, they very frequently invest in companies prior to their going public. And the one of the articles that reported on your round from a few years ago suggested that you raised the money prior to going public. Obviously, 2021 was a hotter year than it is now for IPOs. Is this something that you have in your mind going public? Do you have those sort of plans laid out, or where are you at in that regard?
Yeah, our investors, our board, our employees, our whole team would love to take the company public. I think with what we have is a highly differentiated technology, highly disruptive solution that we think we can make a very successful standalone company. And so we are looking towards taking the company public. The type of investors that we have on the cap table with Fidelity, T. Rowe, and Durable, mm-hmm. They are all big investors in the public market as well, obviously. And so they would love to see us public. But obviously in this space, if there's a very disruptive technology, that's often of interest to larger companies in terms of an acquisition. So sure. We'll never close the door on that. But I think the way we've designed the company, again, it's a little different. We have our own manufacturing facilities in Vancouver. We've built out large clean rooms where we've built all of the clinical devices ourselves. We've just acquired additional space in Vancouver, and we're building those out with more clean room and manufacturing facilities. We expect to build this device and make it ourselves and make it profitably. And so we're basically putting the team and the infrastructure in place now in order to make this a very successful standalone business mm-hmm. That we can take public.
Great. And just final question, I alluded to it earlier, but what are the benefits and the challenges of developing a medical device company up where you are, where you're not in the field of vision of people like me who suggest you're being stealth where you've already raised $200 million, so you can't be that stealth if I'm paying attention. So shame on me. But what are the benefits of building a company up that way, and are there some challenges?
And to be fair, we have been in relative stealth mode for a long time now. With very very targeted outreach to the right people at the right time. There's many benefits to building a company in Canada and in Vancouver. There's a lot of support. I think one of the biggest challenges is that it's not a medical device hub mm-hmm. or hotspot. The challenge I think we have, and you kind of asked, did your team have medical device experience when you started? And we didn't, to be quite honest with you. We came from different technology backgrounds, but with a lot of experience in software and mechanical and electrical engineering, and essentially built a much better technology solution. But I think that's one of the ongoing challenges in Vancouver is there's not a lot of people with medical device technology experience. And so we have to kind of take people that don't have that experience, bring them onto the team, have the right people in place, and then train them or teach them that aspect of it. So, but with COVID and the world going more remote work, we've been able to attract people around the world, basically that are key additions to the team that don't necessarily have to be in Vancouver anymore, right? Like we can add people with clinical support or clinical experience, clinical expertise, or medical device expertise that add to our team now and are remote.
I can think of worse cities in the world to have to go to a company meeting to from time to time. If you're working remotely, Vancouver is a beautiful place to be. So great. Well, it's a fascinating story, a really interesting product, and I appreciate you joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure, Tom. Thanks very much for having me. I enjoyed chatting with you today.
All right, well, that is a wrap. Thanks so much to Freudenberg Medical for sponsoring this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Thank you to Kevin Chaplin for joining us on the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Thanks, of course, to all of you for listening to this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. If I could ask for a little more help, please just subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network so you don't miss future episodes of our DeviceTalks podcasts, including DeviceTalks AI, including Intuitive Talks, including Stryker Talks, and many more. And of course, the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast, please do share it on social media so others can find it. And finally, while you're there on LinkedIn, connect with me, connect with Chris Newmarker, Editor-in-Chief of Mass Device, and connect with Kayleen Brown, Managing Editor of DeviceTalks. We'd love to be part of your networks. We'd love to follow your medtech story, and hopefully you'll enjoy following ours as well. We like to post some interesting stuff from Mass Device and elsewhere. And once again, I'll be posting materials probably for a good long time from the SRS annual meeting in Orlando. It's the Society of Robotic Surgery. So that's it, folks. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode coming your way.